Okay, but I start a bit slow. Okay, look, thanks very much for coming along tonight, folks. How many people have heard me before? About half of you, okay. The masochist half. Okay. Well, no, thanks for coming along tonight. It's a real honour to be amongst Tea Party folk. You're the reason I'm in this country. No, for no other reason but the new folk. The first thing they always ask me is why I should care about the politics of your country. And I'll say straight out there are two reasons. The first is simple gratitude, because my country was only saved from invasion by the Japanese in World War II because of the huge sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers in the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that memory lingers in my country very strongly. The second reason is a little more selfish, but it's related. You know, Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom fails in the United States, it fails everywhere. If you lose your economy, you lose your military superiority, your world leadership, the bad guys of the world, I'm talking Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, and their radical Islamic allies will carve up this planet amongst themselves. Now I get emails all the time from Americans who say, look, if things turn bad here, can I come and live in New Zealand? Okay, and I say, well look, come down for a visit, but the first thing is you should be trying to save your country first. And the second thing is, New Zealand isn't a refuge anyway. No country is. Costa Rica isn't, Belize isn't. Nowhere is going to be safe if America falls. And excuse me. Look, just 1,500 miles to the north of my country lie the beautiful Fijian Islands. Wonderful place, but the Chinese are now training the Fijian military. They're building big dams on the islands. Fiji is now a Chinese client state. Just a few months ago, a retired Chinese general publicly said to the Australian Minister of Defence, now is the time for Australia to choose. Do you stay under American protection or do you come under Chinese protection? And if you're smart, you'll choose China because we are the growing power in the region. Now he wouldn't have been cocky enough to say that under Bush. He wouldn't have said it certainly under Reagan, probably not even under Clinton. But he's saying it now because the bad guys are getting bolder and bolder because they see that your president loves them more than he loves your so-called allies. And all around the world, your allies, and I say that in inverted commas, like Israel, South Korea, Britain, Germany, Canada, Taiwan, Australia, all of them are basically freaking out because they see the bad guys getting bolder and bolder and they see the leadership coming from your White House and they are very worried. And they're thinking, what are we going to do? America used to protect us, but look what they did to Poland. Look what they did to Czechoslovakia. Look what they did to Georgia. Sold them down the river. Are we next? Israel has its back to the wall. They know your president hates them. And they may be pushed into some very desperate measures to save themselves. Desperate measures that could plunge us into World War III tomorrow. Japan was never supposed to rearm after World War II, but it's rearming now. If you were Japanese, would you trust Mr. Obama to protect you from North Korea and China? So you have a president who cries peace, has a Nobel Peace Prize in his trophy cabinet, yet he is leading this world into war and it's a war that the good guys may not win. So every freedom-loving person on this planet has a very strong vested interest in America staying free and America staying strong. Because without that, we're all toast. Now my first book, Barack Obama and the Enemies Within, was 700 pages on Obama. You know, Van Jones, Frank Marshall Davis, that all came from me basically. I promised the second book would be smaller. This one is The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists and Progressives in the United States Congress. And I promised it would be smaller, but the bloody commies just kept on coming. You know, every time I dug deep, there was another one popped up, and another one, and another one, and another one. Even a lot of what I thought were moderates, like Judy Chu, hardcore communists, hardcore. So, the book is basically dealing with what I call the 2 big secrets of communism. And the biggest secret, the first secret is this, and I think they borrowed this from the devil, because the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. And that's what the communists have done. Most of the Western world either doesn't believe they still exist, or if they do, doesn't see them as a threat. Goes back to Lenin and Sun Tzu. When strong, feign weakness. When weak, feign strength. They're feigning weakness right now. They're a lot stronger than we think. The second secret, and this is hardly ever written about, hardly ever commented on in all the thousands of books on communism, but my book deals with it extensively. It is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party to dictate the terms, the legislation and policy direction of their country. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that tiny Marxist sects, mainly, and I'm saying sects, S-E-C-T-S, okay? Tiny Marxist sects are basically dictating the policies of the Democratic Party and your government. So how could that be? 340 million Americans, less than 20,000 communists, if that. How could they possibly be dictating policy here? Well, I just want to say that voting, and you know, when the communists stand for office, when they occasionally do, they get 25 or 50 votes or 60 votes or something. So how could they possibly be running your country? Just consider this. Voting, the number of votes you get, isn't the only way you can influence public policy. There was a man in Chicago a few years ago, a man called Al Capone. How many votes did he ever get? You're telling me he didn't run Chicago? How many votes does the mafia get in Sicily? You're telling me they don't run Sicily? There's backroom deals, there's infiltration, extortion, blackmail, propaganda. There's a whole heap of ways that small groups can control whole nations. And the key to the movement in this country, the thing that gives the communists the power they have, is the labour unions. The communist labour unions. Now you were very lucky though in this country for many years. You are different from most Western countries because your labour movement was run by anti-communists like George Meany and Lane Kirkland. And for all their faults, they kept the Reds out of the unions. But in 1995, there was a coup d'etat in the unions. That year, Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group, took over the AFL-CIO, got rid of Lane Kirkland, and put their man, John Sweeney, in as president. And now they have their protege, Richard Trumka, doing the job. So what did that do? by gaining control of the labour unions, even though they're only 11 or 12% of the workforce, that gave them control of the Democratic Party. Because there's hardly a Democrat at any level in this country who does not owe his job to the labour unions. For money, for door knockers, people putting up signs, people to commit vote fraud, whatever they need, the labour unions are there to do it. But he who pays the piper calls the tune. If you're dependent on the labour unions for your job, you do what the labour unions tell you to do. You vote the way they want you to, and you promote the policies they want you to. So basically, the communists set a policy. It might be cap and trade, or card check, or immigration reform, or Obamacare, or the START treaty with Russia, whatever it is. They set a policy, they make it labour union policy, and the unions make it Democratic Party policy. And then it goes to the House, and it goes through the Senate, and it goes to the President's desk, and he signs off communist policy. And they do it all the time. That's how a very small tail can wag a very large dog. Now, that sounds a bit far-fetched all the same, but I'm going to give some examples of how this works in practice. And the first one I'm going to refer to happened in New Zealand in 1984. In that year, my government elected a socialist Labour government, my people elected a socialist Labour government. And the first thing they did was to enact legislation banning nuclear warships from our harbours. And that had the effect of destroying the Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance. ANZUS killed it stone cold dead overnight. So how come, at the height of the Cold War, how come a pro-Western, pro-American country like New Zealand could so willingly turn its back on the Western alliance? Well, this is how it was done. A few months after that, I had the privilege of interviewing a New Zealander who had infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party for our government security services. He was basically an FBI type spy inside the Communist Party. And in 1983, he and 3 other comrades were given the greatest honour any communist could enjoy. They were sent to Moscow to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning in Leningradsky Prospect. And this was not a small institute. This was 6,500 students from all over the world, many of them on 7-year courses, many of them with one-to-one tutelage. This was a training academy for the future world communist leadership. And they were all taught Russian history, espionage techniques, racial agitation, trade union leadership, and the most important thing of all, especially for the Western communists, they were taught how to take Moscow's policies back to their country and by using the labour unions and the peace movement to make those policies their government's policies. So from Moscow to the communists, to the labour unions, to the law of the land. And they did that in Britain and France and Germany and Italy and Canada and Japan and Australia, virtually every Western country, multiple times. But this was the time of the massive anti-nuclear marches in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of people waving ban the bomb banners, get us out of NATO, get America out of Europe. And there was a real fear in some circles that NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which you guys are the linchpin of, might break up. And of course the Soviets were funding all of this and directing it because they wanted NATO to break up, so that would give them control of Europe. And believe you me, back then, as right now in 2013, your military is Moscow's #1 target. #1. Because if they can destroy your military, which their great friend Obama is doing with great gusto at the moment, that will give them world control. And the game is still being played right now. So the Soviets wanted to break up NATO, but they were chess players, they're subtle, and they think, well, we've got this big game going on in Europe, how about we take away another country outside of Europe, out of the Western Alliance, and use the propaganda value of that to help destroy NATO. So they picked on New Zealand, which was small and progressive, and the communists controlled our labour unions, our peace movement, and it heavily infiltrated our Labour Party, the equivalent of your Democrats. So they knew that they couldn't sell, if they wanted to get New Zealand out of ANZUS, they couldn't sell it as an anti-American thing, because New Zealanders love America. So they got all their marketing experts and their psychology experts and their slogan experts, and if you think American corporations are good at marketing, they've got nothing on the Soviets. They've been studying how to manipulate Western public opinion for 80 years now, and they are very, very good at it. Very sophisticated. So they came up with a bunch of slogans. This had to be pro-patriotic New Zealand stuff. You know, Kiwi standing up for peace. New Zealanders striking independent foreign policy course. New Zealanders standing against the nuclear arms race. Not a whiff of anti-Americanism, all pro-New Zealand patriotic slogans. So these 4 delegates went back to New Zealand with these slogans, held secret meetings with the Labour Party, with the peace movement, the labour unions. They mounted a public campaign, and in 6 months legislation was in front of our Parliament, it was signed off, and our alliance with your country was dead. Just like that. The Soviets could not believe how quick it was. And I'll tell you, if you go down to Disney World and you stand in a queue next to a New Zealander and they love coming to Disney World, you'll recognise the accent, say, hey, didn't you guys go anti-nuclear back in 1984? And they'll puff out their chest with pride. They'll say, yeah, we did, we did. We were the mouse that roared. We stood up for peace. We stood against the nuclear arms race. They'll be so proud of it. And hardly one New Zealander in 4 million people has any idea that those policies they're so proud of were designed by the KGB at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning. Totally suck it. And still suck it today. Could this happen here?
Yeah, it is happening here.
If I told you that 10 years ago, what would you have said? Not likely. Not quite so sure now. Okay, I want to give some examples. I want to start with a small one first. I'll tell a little story, then give the example. Any Vietnam veterans in the room? I thought there'd be a few. Thank you very much. Okay, well this might make some people a little bit angry. Now, just a few months ago, a few weeks ago, your president had a visit from the communist premier of Vietnam. Had a little conference in Washington, DC. And the president made a statement at that conference that caused a bit of controversy on the conservative blogosphere. Because Mr. Obama said, it's a well-known fact that Ho Chi Minh, the communist leader of North Vietnam during the war, was a big admirer of Thomas Jefferson and the American Revolution. Can you believe that? Well, there was a grain of truth in what he said, a small grain, and the fact that Obama knew this story and was trained at the knee of the Hawaiian communist propagandist Frank Marshall Davis tells me where Obama's coming from. This was a signal, a nudge, nudge, little hint to the troops. I know the real story here, guys. Because the real story is this. Back in World War II, Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the communist guerrillas, a hardcore Stalinist, trained at the Lenin School, butchered thousands of his own people, was fighting against the Japanese invaders. And he was working with the United States Army to do that, particularly the OSS, your Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of your CIA. Now the OSS was heavily penetrated by communists, because while Bill Donovan, the man who set it up, recruited communists from the Abraham Lincoln Brigades who fought in the Spanish Civil War because he wanted people with European war experience. And those communists were never fully cleaned out. Your CIA was penetrated from day one. But note that name. The communists who fought in Spain didn't call themselves the Lenin Brigade, or the Marx Brigade, or the Trotsky Brigade, or the Stalin Brigade. It was the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, because they love to use your revolutionary icons to hide their revolution. They love it. Mr. Obama does it quite often. Deception. And this was what it was about, because Ho Chi Minh, after they got rid of the French, the Japanese, Ho Chi Minh wanted to get rid of the French colonialists. And he thought, well, the Americans helped us to get rid of the Japanese, I'm going to sucker the Americans into helping us get rid of the French. And he wrote letters to FDR imploring his aid, because he knew FDR didn't like the French very much. Sorry for waving this around, but Marco Rubio's taught me a thing or two, you know. But, so Ho Chi Minh knew he couldn't sucker the Americans in if he went around speaking about Stalin and Lenin and communist revolution. So he deliberately went around the country making speeches, did a big one in downtown Hanoi in front of thousands of people with OSS officers dotted all around. And he said, yeah, I'm a great admirer of Thomas Jefferson. I support the American Revolution. That is the model for the future of Vietnam. Purely designed to sucker FDR into helping him against the French. But FDR died, and a real Democrat, Harry Truman, took over, and he was nowhere near as stupid. He would not have a bar of Ho Chi Minh. Frank Marshall Davis used to write little articles in this communist publication out in Hawaii calling Harry Truman a fascist. He admired FDR, but Harry Truman was a fascist because Harry Truman stood up against Stalin. And people need to remember too, they had the House Un-American Activities Committee in those days, established by Democrats, not Republicans, Democrats. Because in those days, the Democrats were often more conservative than the GOP was. How things have changed. And it's just a pity that most of the loyal Democrats in this country today still think they're voting for FDR or JFK. Neither of whom would have a chance of getting a seat in Congress with today's Democratic Party. Not a chance. They'd be regarded as right-wing Tea Party type extremists. So, now, Obama said another thing during that meeting which was very significant. He said that we have to get on board with Vietnam repairing the damage of the Vietnam War. Now what that means in English is American taxpayers have to send their money to Vietnam to repair the damage done by bombing in Agent Orange that your troops did fighting off a communist invasion. They sort of forget this thing that North Vietnam started that war. And most Americans probably don't even know it these days. Now, there's a little communist group in your country called the Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism. See, they use that word democracy to hide their intentions. One of its most famous members is Angela Davis. Some of you probably know her. It's an offshoot of the Communist Party USA. Now, the Committees of Correspondence is allied to Vietnam. That's their communist country. And they've had a little campaign going for several years, the Agent Orange Responsibility Campaign. And the purpose of that is to get your government to pay reparations to Vietnam to take responsibility for the damage done by Agent Orange. And they've brought delegations in front of your Congress from Communist Vietnam, including with young girls with no legs, saying this was done by Agent Orange, you know, trying to get the congressman reduced to tears and saying we need to repair the damage, we need to send money to help them out in Vietnam. They've even got Charlie Sheen to narrate the documentary for them. Charlie Sheen, that great patriot. Now, they've even got several of your congressmen on board, and they've got legislation pending now. They've got Al Franken on board with the campaign, Jeff Merkley, Tom Harkin. They've got Sheila Jackson-Lee out of Texas, John Conyers out of Michigan, and until he left Congress and became a sex pest in San Diego, Bob Filner. Bob Filner was even sent to Vietnam a couple of years ago to negotiate this, and the trip was paid for by the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, an old Soviet front, now run by the Cubans. So communist money paid your congressman to go to Vietnam to negotiate reparations from your country to communist Vietnam. And I'll tell you that money won't be going to the victims of Agent Orange, it'll be going to the Vietnamese Communist government. But I know all over this country you have former servicemen suffering from Agent Orange damage, living in homeless shelters, living in psychiatric hospitals, long-term care establishments, living on the streets. There's never enough money for those guys, but your president thinks it's okay to send your taxpayers' money to repair, to pay reparations to Vietnam for a war they started. When do you pay reparations to somebody who started the violence? It's supposed to be the other way around. There's a small communist group doing that. Does that make anybody angry?
Yes.
I should hope so. It's all covered in my book, a whole chapter, photographs, a whole lot. It's called The Vietnam Scam. So what about a bigger example? Immigration. Specifically, the legalisation of 12 million illegal immigrants and the granting of voting rights. Who thinks we should do that?
No.
Hell no, you should be saying. Hell no. Now you've got elements in the GOP up the top saying, this is going to be good for the GOP because the Latinos are going to start voting Republican. Yeah, and I've got a bridge in Brooklyn that you might be interested in. You know, the black population has been voting 90% Democrat for more than 50 years. The Jewish population in this country has been voting 80% Democrat for more than 100 years. Yet the GOP is trying to tell you that by giving these people amnesty and destroying the respect for your rule of law, that they're all going to start voting Republican. Maybe in 20 years, but we've got 2 election cycles to save this country. I will say the only reason those GOPers are doing that, they're basically in the pocket of the Chamber of Commerce, who thinks they can get a whole bunch of cheap, a whole lot of cheap labour to run their factories and farms. They care about making a dollar more than the national security of your country. And you've got certain GOPers, I won't mention Marco Rubio is one of them, who are trying to sell out your country over the issue. Now, why does the left want this? Well, this movement's it's been going a long time, and the communists have always been behind it. Back in the 1960s, it was started off in California by a man called Bert Corona, hardcore Communist Party member. He set up numerous support networks for illegal immigrants right throughout the Southwest. and he started the Viva Kennedy clubs, the first organised effort to get Latinos into the Democratic Party. But he also trained several protégés, 3 of whom are with us now. One of them is a man called Gil Cedillo, a Marxist, until very recently a California state senator. He was the man who got the DREAM Act enacted in California a year or 2 ago, one that gave rights to the children of illegal immigrants. Another one of Corona's protégés is Antonio Villagrosa, who was until this year the mayor of that city, Los Angeles. Another hardcore Marxist, went to Cuba with the Venceremos brigades, cut sugarcane for Castro, but he turned Los Angeles into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and that brought hundreds of thousands of Latinos into the area, and they were signed up with voting rights, and that changed the voting patterns and demographics of Southern California. The third protégé is Maria Elena Durazo, another Marxist, and she is head of the California Labor Movement. And she, over 15 years, has engineered numerous Latino voting drives to sign up hundreds of thousands of Latino voters. And that was a deliberate policy. All 3 of them worked together to change the demographics and voting patterns in California. Now California, which is the largest state in your country and has the most electoral college votes, this was once a red state, is now irretrievably blue. And that's a deliberate policy. Totally deliberate. Even Orange County, once the most conservative region in America, is now purple. The Republicans are toast in California, and that was done by Bert Corona, Durazo, Villagrosa, and Gil Cedillo. They did it. Now what about another man? This is a guy out of Arizona, a guy called Lorenzo Torres, the most successful politician out of that state in decades. And I guarantee you, most Arizonans have never heard of him. He was the head of the Communist Party USA's Latino Commission. And his job was to coordinate support for illegal immigrants all across the Southwest, from Texas to California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, the whole lot. And he set up numerous organisations, and he led campaigns against any laws cracking down on illegal immigrants, set up a whole bunch of networks, initiated a whole bunch of voting drives, and he got 3 communist sympathisers elected to the California as congressman from from Arizona. Arizona, one of the reddest states in the country, one of the most libertarian states, has 3 Communist Party affiliated congressmen. Raul Grijalva, Ed Pastor, and the freshman Kirsten Sinema. All the work of Lorenzo Torres. The third man I'll talk about, Eliseo Medina, currently Executive Vice President of the SEIU, the nation's largest labour union and the one with the biggest Latino membership. He is the leader of the immigration rights movement in this country and has engineered getting that bill before your Senate, and is now organising demonstrators, union demonstrators, outside the offices of Republican congressmen all over your country to get them to push a bill through the next Congress. He has worked with Raul Grijalva for decades. He's worked with Luis Gutierrez, the other main leader of the immigrants' rights movement, a congressman from Illinois, a former member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a Marxist-Leninist group, pro-Cuban. Eliseo Medina is the man. He's even served on Obama's Latino Advisory Committee. A hardcore member of Democratic Socialists of America and a big supporter of the Communist Party USA. One of the most powerful labour unionists in your country. And just to prove my point on the labour unions, Which organisation in this country 20 years ago was the most vocal opponent, the most hardcore opponent of illegal immigration? Which organisation was constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties for any employer who employed illegal aliens? Who was it? The AFL-CIO. Because they rightly understood that illegal immigrants were unfair competition for their members and would drive down wages and conditions. Now, which organisation today is leading the charge for the legalisation of illegal immigrants? The AFL-CIO. Why the change? Because in 1995, as I said, the AFL-CIO went from being an organisation supporting the rights of workers to an organisation promoting Marxist revolution. And illegal immigrants might be bad for workers, but they are bloody good for Marxist revolution. So why does the left want this? How does it suit them? Well, I just got to say too, it was not easy to get workers to vote against their own interests, but it was Eliseo Medina single-handedly that got the AFL-CIO to change their policy at their 2000 conference from anti-illegal immigrant to pro-illegal immigrant. Eliseo Medina did that. That was his baby. So why do they want it? What's in it for them? Well, obviously there's more union members, but that's not the main reason. Medina let the cat out of the bag at a progressive conference in Washington, DC 2 years ago. He basically told the whole audience, immigration reform, an immigration bill, amnesty for illegal immigrants and voting rights is our #1 priority for the progressive movement. We have to push this through. Why? Did he speak about compassion, reuniting families, giving workers an even break, helping the economy? Not one word. All he talked about was the numbers. He said this, in 2008, Latinos went for Obama and progressive candidates 80%. If we stand by these people and get them citizenship and voting rights, they will stand by us. That will give us 8 million at least more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but for the foreseeable future. In other words, a Democratic Party, one-party state, controlled by the Marxists. Because if they get 8 million more votes, Texas will go blue. The Southwest will go blue. Colorado will go like California, permanently. Even Georgia would go purple. But if Texas alone goes blue, your second largest state, combined with the Electoral College votes of California, which Bert Corona and his friends have already got, it is mathematically impossible for the Republicans to ever win another presidential election. It cannot be done. The GOP will be toast, and the conservative movement in this country will be done. Onward socialism. That's what it will be. So what about another example? Anybody heard of Obamacare? Okay. It's not fully socialised medicine yet, we know that, but we all know where it's going. Harry Reid admitted this is going to single payer. Fully socialised healthcare. Now the father of the socialised healthcare movement in this country is a retired Chicago doctor named Quentin Young. The guy's pushing 90 now, but he's been working on this for more than 50 years. He set up a whole bunch of organisations around this country, Physicians for a National Health Plan. He's worked with Canadian doctors, worked with the AMA, and he's also worked with John Conyers and several other congressmen to get single-payer bills in front of your Congress on several occasions. Always got voted down. But in 2009, with the Affordable Health Care Act, they started to make progress. And it's not surprising that the progress came under Mr. Obama, because for many years in Chicago, Quentin Young was Mr. Obama's personal physician. He openly claims credit for indoctrinating Obama into socialised health care. Says he was a big fan of single payer when he was a state senator and nobody was watching what he said. So basically, but there's more than that, Quentin Young was a 40-year veteran of the Communist Party USA until he left that group to set up Democratic Socialists of America. So a Marxist indoctrinated Obama into socialist health care. And to prove, basically, Obamacare came from Democratic Socialists of America. It's all documented in the book. I quote them extensively. They've been working on it 40 years. It's their baby. They gave it to you. And just to prove a point, before the 2012 election, the Obama campaign released a little video. It was designed to mock Mitt Romney. Because they said, guess what, Mitt? The man who designed Obamacare for us, the architect of Obamacare, their words, was John McDonough, a former Massachusetts state legislator and Harvard academic. He designed it. And you've been mocking Obamacare, Mitt. You want to abolish it. You know what? John McDonough also designed Romneycare. So Mitt, how can you possibly be criticising Obamacare when the same man designed your system? And it's true, McDonough did. But Mitt Romney got a bill presented to him from the Massachusetts state legislature, which is chock full of Marxists, and he pushed it back, tried to modify it, tried to make it less socialist, but he got stuck with it. But what the Obama video doesn't say is that John McDonough, the man who designed both of these systems, is a former chair of Boston Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist. So a Marxist designed Obamacare, a bunch of Marxists pushed it through the unions, and another Marxist indoctrinated Obamacare into accepting it, Obama into accepting it. So that's 3 examples where small Marxist groups are dictating policy in your country right now. And I'll tell you, every major plank of the Democratic Party, every one can be traced back to the Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialists of America. If you want to know what those guys are going to do tomorrow, you read the People's World today. Because what's in that communist paper today will be union policy tomorrow and Democratic Party policy the next day. That's how it works. And the other thing the book deals with, think about this, folks, this is a very security conscious country. You see that every time you go through an airport. Anybody here ever applied for a government job? Come on, must be somebody. Yes, mate, yes, a few of you. Now, did you have to get a security clearance? Did the FBI check your background out? Well, I know they do. They go through your childhood associates, business associates, overseas travel, educational background, drug habits. They practically go through your underwear drawers. And so they should, because you may be in a position of trust or responsibility one day. You might have lives in your hands. You might have the security of the country in your hands. They need to be able to trust you. But what happens if you put on a suit and tie and you get elected to Congress or the Senate and you serve on the Science and Technology Committee or the Intelligence Committee or the Defence Committee or the, one of any number of important committees, judiciary, whatever. What happens if you serve on those committees and have top secret documents going across your desk on a regular basis and the ability to influence policy affecting 340 million people and indeed the entire free world? What happens if you're in that position and you like Barbara Lee, who's been down to Cuba more than 6 times, or John Conyers, who's got a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA, or Rosa DeLauro, who has an office in the headquarters of the Connecticut Communist Party, or Nancy Pelosi, who has a 40-year history with the Communist Party, or Patty Murray out of Washington State, who hangs around with that state's Communist Party, or Jim McDermott from Washington, who went to Iraq on a propaganda visit on the dime of Saddam Hussein's intelligence services, or Jan Schakowsky, or Danny Davis, or Jerry Nadler, who have all been card-carrying members of Democratic Socialists of America, or Raul Grijalva, who's written for the Communist Party publication, or Kirsten Sinema, who's a long history with the Communist Party, or Maxine Waters, or blah, 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 blah. What happens if you're someone like that? How much scrutiny do you get? Big fat zero. You can be at the heart of the American government and be the biggest security risk in the country, and nobody says boo. Obama, look, I tell you what, Alan West got himself in trouble a couple of years ago, said there were 80 communists in Congress. He was a bit loose on his terminology. He was also way low on the numbers. I would say there's at least 100 members of your House of Representatives and 25 members of your Senate, and of course your President, who couldn't get a basic security clearance to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. Not a chance. Yet these people are at the heart of your government. They used to call that a fifth column. And I'll tell you what, a fifth column is more fearsome than any amount of armies surrounding your town. The enemy's within. But I don't want to depress you, well, and that's what the book's about. I profile 51 congressmen and 14 senators and their ties to various communist groups, and their work on behalf of those groups and on behalf of foreign countries. But I don't want to depress you folks with any of that, or bring you down in any way.
Too late.
Am I a little bit late?
Too late.
Okay, too late. Look, if I thought there was no hope for America, I'd be back home right now building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans. Okay? I'm not mocking prepping at all. But in 2008, the left thought they had a slam dunk. They had the House, they had the Senate, they had their man in the White House, and they were going to, they had their agenda already written out, and they were going to steamroll Middle America out of existence once and for all. They had it in their grasp. 50 years of work was coming to fruition. They had it. But in 2009 and 2010, something miraculous happened. What was that? You guys. And I don't use that word lightly. You guys came out of left field, or should I say right field, and you took me as much by surprise as you did the left. They were blown away, they were shocked, they did not see you coming. You blogged and you emailed and you marched and you agitated and you voted and you phone banked and you put some spine into the GOP, and you guys, not the GOP, took back the House in 2010, and you brought the agenda of the left to a grinding, screeching halt. Stopped them stone cold dead. And some of you don't understand why they hate you. You wonder why they call you racist and extremist. Bloody hell, you took it out of their grasp. They had the biggest prize they've been working for their entire lives. They had it, and you took it off them. And you deserve to give yourselves a huge pat on the back for that. because you saved your country. You imagine, had you not done that, they would have cap and trade now, and card check, and the illegal immigrants would be voting in 2016. You already have Obamacare. Obama would have gutted your military even more than he has. All the agenda of the left would be in now. And where would you be then? Where would we all be? So if you guys don't think you make a difference, you read some of the left-wing publications like I do. They think you made a difference. They hate you for it. And they fear you for it. And the biggest thing they fear is that you will carry on through 2014 and take it off them again. Because they are 5% of the population, if that. You guys are 10% of the population. But a 5% army that is organised will always beat a 10% rabble that isn't. But if you guys stay together and unified and keep doing what you're doing, and I know you are, you will grow your movement, and a 10 or 12 or 15% organised movement is always going to beat a 5% movement any day. It's just the math. And they are terrified of it. That is why they demonise you. If you didn't worry them, they wouldn't be saying what they do. They wouldn't bother with you. But they do. Even Obama has admitted recently that he would have got a lot more of an agenda through had it not been for the Tea Party Republicans, meaning you people. So you need to give yourself credit. Now I know that it's tough in the trenches, guys. I've been in practical politics. Nobody cares. Everybody's more interested in NASCAR. You know, the GOP lets you down continuously, stabs you in the back. It is tough work. I know that. But think back to that first American Revolution. Think back then, less than 10% of the population supported it, less than 3% actually fought in it. Nothing has changed. But a bunch of farmers and labourers and blacksmiths and fishermen, and I've got to say pastors, long rifle in one hand, Bible in the other, took on the greatest military empire the world had ever known and bloody well beat them. And how miraculous is that? That is our inspiration. But there's a quote from Goethe that I love, the German poet. If you are bold, powerful forces will come to your aid. Now those guys were bold, and the French came to help them out. But you've got to think, there was a lot more powerful forces than the French. George Washington regarded his victory as miraculous. And you think, guys, if you are bold, do you seriously think powerful forces won't come to your aid? Do you think things have changed? Same principles apply. What you're doing now is as miraculous as what was done back then. But you've got to be bold and you've got to stay the course. Those guys fought for years. They got chased continuously from state to state. They were freezing to death and starving in Valley Forge. They were almost done. But they staged a surprise counterattack and they beat the British at Yorktown and forced a surrender. It ain't over till it's over. Ever. Now, I'm gonna, I go on and on, I know you're all tired, but I just want to say some things. People ask me, what should we be doing? Yes. The first thing I say is more of what you already are. Because you're doing nothing wrong, you're doing everything right, you just need to do more of it. And not bicker amongst yourselves. Because this is a time for unity. Now, you think back, there's a choice in this country. There's only one force that can beat the Democratic Party in this country. Only one. And like it or not, that is the GOP. Now, you have a choice, folks. Some people talk about forming a third party. That's wonderful. Fly the flag, but you will go down to defeat, and you'll condemn your children to slavery. You can get out of politics entirely and play more golf. You will also condemn your children to slavery. You can concentrate on local issues. That's good, but you'll condemn your children to slavery.
Right.
That is the harsh reality. But there's only one force that can ensure that the GOP wins the next election, and only one force that is going to make their victory worth a damn. And that is you guys. Only you can give them the spine to win, and only you can give them the spine to do anything useful once they have. Think back to 76, folks. 1976. A guy came out of California, Ronald Reagan, wanted to be president. And what did the GOP old guard think of Ronald Reagan? Hated him, opposed him every step of the way. And he was just beaten for the nomination by Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford lost to Jimmy Carter. Who enjoyed the Carter years? A lot of fun? Time of optimism and business growth and all the things you love? They weren't that good, were they? But in 1980, the grassroots rose up again and they backed Ronald Reagan, and they forced the GOP to give them their candidate. And what happened? Blew out the election, stormed the country, and he made real changes. Was there a difference between the Carter and the Reagan years? Huge. Now we are Carter on steroids. And we need Reagan on steroids to change things, to turn it around. And not just to do what Reagan did, but to go way beyond what Reagan did. Because things have got far worse than when he was in power. Now, to win the next election, we need everybody. We need those libertarian kids who vote for Ron Johnson. We need those Christians, evangelical Christians, who stayed home in the millions last time. We need those several million Republicans who didn't vote. We need the social conservatives, the fiscal conservatives. We need every patriotic American to join the cause. Now, if the GOP is allowed to stand another Gerald Ford or another John McCain, what's going to happen? The base is going to stay home and the Democrats will probably win. But what will happen if you guys choose your candidate? If you guys have a dream team already planned, and I'm going to say a few names, you could probably think of a lot better ones, but you imagine if you are rallying behind someone like Ted Cruz, with say Alan West as the VP, Rand Paul, Secretary of the Treasury, Sarah Palin, Secretary of Energy, John Bolton, Secretary of State, David Barton, Secretary of Education. What a different country this could be. And is that an impossible dream? Is that out of your grasp? Can you do what the grassroots did with Reagan in 1980? Can you stand true and force the GOP to give you the leaders you want? It can be done. But you've got to get everybody on board. You've got to get those kids. I go around airports and I wear my Reagan button, and I've had 16-year-old goth-looking girls come up to me and say, "Oh, wasn't he great?" You imagine what would happen if I wore a Gerald Ford badge. The young people will rally to an idealistic principled candidate. Why do the young people love Ron Paul? I disagree with some of what Ron Paul says, but I will tell you, he may not be charismatic and he may be old, but the young people love him because he stands firm. He sticks to his principles and doesn't back down for anyone. If we want to rally those young people, the idealists, the Christians, we need someone like that. And the GOP will only give you someone like that if you make them. So you have to get unified, you have to take over the GOP at every level. Right. No mercy, you're a rhino, you're out. If you don't stand by the Constitution, you're gone. Right. You are the biggest and most powerful force in the GOP today. And they're trying to shut you out. And some of you are doing it yourself by voluntarily getting out. Now is the time not to retreat. Now is the time to attack. Because you need to lay the groundwork for 2016 and 2014. Because you've done it in 2010, you have to do it again and again. Because you've only got 2 more election cycles, and after that, if you lose, you might as well go and play golf. But if you work and do everything you can in the next 3 years, win or lose, you can stand and look yourself in the mirror and you can be proud. Because you know you've given it everything. And you've done everything you can for your children and your grandchildren. Now if you're thinking about it, folks, whether you should get involved, whether you should stay the course or not, you know, we all look back to those first American revolutionaries, right, for inspiration. They starved and they pledged their lives, their liberty and their sacred honour on an impossible dream. And they prevailed. They won. We admire them so much. But you think about yourselves, and you think in 200 years in the future, there'll be some high school, a kid in front of a high school class in this town, he'll get up in front of his classmates in a civics class, he'll say, you know what guys, we all studied history, we looked at that second American Revolution, you know, when a lot of people thought this country was done for, and the patriots stood up, and against all the odds, they took back the Constitution and restored the Republic. And the liberty and prosperity we enjoy today, we owe to what they did back then. We all know that, guys. But guess what? I did some research into my family background. And I found out my great-great-great-great-great-grandma and granddaddy, they were in the Tea Party in this town. And how proud would you be? Is there any better game? So I just want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you're doing, for your country and for my country. God bless America and God bless the Tea Party. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I don't know, is it time for a couple of questions or, yeah. I've got to drive away for a couple of hours, but I'm willing to take a couple of questions. I just want to say about the books, my cheque from the Koch brothers hasn't arrived this week. Yours probably hasn't either. You know what I'm talking about. But these books fund my travels. I'm here for 90 days in this country. Now just by the way, if I stay 91, I get a free cell phone. So the Obama, there's a few copies of my Obama book there, The Enemies Within, and there's also a few DVDs of this speech. The DVDs are 10 bucks, the books are 30 each. So please consider and I'll sign them for you. Yes, ma'am? Yeah, well, okay. Well, he does extensively, he puts billions into it. But I just want to say where I think he gets his money from. And I want to say who I think he's working for. This is a bit of supposition on my part, and I don't normally do that. But just consider this option. Little Georgie Soros, little Georgie Schwartz in those days, was a Jewish boy in Hungary in World War II. And the Nazis invaded, and his family got him fostered out to a Christian family to protect him. And little Georgie used to go around with the father of this family confiscating Jewish property for the Nazis. Said it was a fun time, he really loved it. Okay, then the Russians, the Soviets invaded Hungary, and they were hanging Nazi collaborators from the lampposts. But little Georgie was allowed to leave Soviet-occupied Hungary through numerous checkpoints, through Soviet-occupied Austria, out to the west. Now, how easy would it be for a Nazi collaborator to leave Hungary and Austria unless you'd made some sort of deal with the authorities? Now, Soros worked extensively with the Russian and Chinese governments in the 70s and 80s, had high-level contacts with the communist regimes, and has worked funding Marxist and socialist groups right across this country, right across the West ever since. He's been trying to destroy America and Israel. Who's ever heard of a man called Armand Hammer? Okay, son of a Communist Party member. In the early 20s, he was an American businessman who basically bailed out the Bolshevik Revolution, facilitated trade, and kept Lenin's revolution alive. I think Soros is a modern-day Armand Hammer. And I think certain countries' intelligence services get them to launder money for them and also give them tips that come from their spies on where to invest his money. I think they have built him up. And when America gets serious about internal security again, and you're going to have to if you want to survive, little Georgie should be up in front of your Congress on a subpoena and grilled and grilled and grilled and grilled until they find out who's funding him, where it all comes from, and who his masters are.
For Rand Paul.
Sorry?
He needs to be grilled for Rand Paul.
Yep. Rand and Ted Cruz as well. Any other questions? Yes, sir?
Where do you see the Muslim population, which Obama has placated to continuously on all fronts, internationally and domestically, arising in this fray between the Democrats and the Republicans? Yeah, well, look, the Democrats are facilitating this. The Republicans are also being infiltrated through Grover Norquist and Sahil Khan. But if you go back further, see, we know that in this country, the communists have always infiltrated the mainstream churches. That's well known. But you think about this, the Islamic seminaries are a lot closer to Russia than the American Christian churches are. They've been infiltrating them for more than 70 years. And they're just as though we have Marxist liberation theology in the Christian churches, they have liberation Islam as well. A lot of what we call revolutionary Islam has actually got a Marxist tinge to it. And look, Ion Pachepa, who was the head of the Romanian KGB in the 70s, highest ever Soviet bloc defector, just put out a book called Disinformation, a great book. And he claimed that in the 1970s, the Soviets sent 4,000 agents armed with an anti-Semitic forgery, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, into the Middle East to stir up hatred against Israel and the United States. You know, radical Islam and, you know, the #2 man in Al-Qaeda was trained by the KGB. Hamas was set up by the KGB. The Palestine Liberation Organization was run by the KGB. You know, I'm not saying every radical Islamic works for the communists, but the movement is certainly allied to the communist movement. They work together, and though they may hate each other, they hate your country more. So they're working hand in glove to destroy you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am?
Where is Obama getting his money? It's supposed to be worth millions now.
Oh, he gets book deals, he gets appearance fees, he gets you know, money funneled in from big donors. You know,
No president has ever earned the amount.
Oh, well, he might earn more than some, but Bill Clinton is a multi-millionaire. All presidents make lots of money. But Obama has been funded. Look, to me, Obama is the Manchurian candidate. He has been funded his entire life. Other presidents get funded when they become president. He has been funded from boyhood, through Harvard, through law school, the whole lot. He's been getting Arab money, communist money, union money, you name it. He has been built up from the beginning. So, and I think when he leaves the US presidency, I think what he wants to be is president of the United Nations. He sees himself as a future king of the world. That's where he wants to go. But, yes ma'am?
I've heard that Obama has over 50,000 Russians up here at Paris.
There are Russian troops dotted all over the United States. You know, the most significant thing, look, Obama has worked with pro-Soviet communists his entire life. Alice Palmer, Frank Marshall Davis, all his life. The most significant thing that Obama said in his first term of office, when he was caught off mic in Korea with Dmitry Medvedev, the Russian president, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. And Medvedev says, yes, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. Obama loves the Russians like a chocolate. You know, he is in with them. And the Russians' #1 priority is to destroy your military. That is why sequestration was aimed. You know, why does 20% of your federal budget, the military budget, take about 90% of the cuts? Because Obama's agenda is to destroy your military to the benefit of his friends in Russia. That's what it's all about. Once he's done that, you are defenseless. And do you think the Russians are going to sit on their hands then?
What can we do about the news media there? They're so biased.
Yeah, well, it's a huge problem, and you've got to support the Becks and the Breitbarts, and you build your own media up. Look, I know the Tea Party around here. You know, Bob's got a paper going that's going all over the country. Anybody who's not pushing that should be, because the grassroots is where it's at. We can't get round the mainstream media, but they can't stop us doing grassroots stuff. You know, so, you know, we don't have to influence every American. To me, it's 5% trying to destroy it, 10% trying to save it. We just have to drag a few of those 85% in the middle over to our side. And that kind of the newspaper and things that Bob's doing, that can help do that. Yes, sir?
Do you have any thoughts why Sean Hannity is being replaced by, I forget the name, on the Fox network?
No, I didn't know he was. You know, it's interesting that they've got this new Crossfire program, and they've got Van Jones as one of the commentators. You know, the media is like when Glenn Beck started getting close to George Soros, Glenn Beck was pushed out of Fox. Fox is better than the other networks, but it's not what we need. You know, we need far more hardcore than that. And we need something that people can actually say the truth without risking losing their jobs. So, Sean Hannity, you know, if he says too much, he'll get pushed out. I don't know the specifics of the story though. Take one more question, then I'll sign box. If there's any more, or you're too shell-shocked. Yes, sir?
What do you think is going to happen here with Hillary Clinton in the next election?
Yeah, my guess, I think Elizabeth Warren's going to run. I think the guy out of Maryland, O'Malley, is going to run. And I think Hillary is going to run. And I wouldn't be surprised if she had Michelle Obama on the ticket.
Yeah.
You know, that would be, you know, so we've got to be prepared for that. Because no matter how obnoxious Hillary is to us, there's some people out there who still seem to like it for some reason. And, you know, but, sorry? Yeah, well, you know, what Oh, I was going to say a crude joke there, but I shouldn't. I was going to compare it to Hillary, but there's an old joke. What do lawyers use as contraceptives? Their personalities. Sorry?
Hang Hillary over in Benghazi.
Well, she's let people die, you know. Watergate, nobody died in Watergate. This is a far bigger scandal. But look, my message is this basically: you guys are on the right track. You're doing the right stuff. You know, you've saved the country once. And you guys have done it. Not the GOP, no one else, you guys. But now is not the time to throw the toys out of the cot or give up. You know, this is the time, like Valley Forge, this is the toughest time before the dawn. This is the dark before the dawn. And a much more positive future is within your grasp if you stay the course. If you don't, you know the consequences. So now is the time to give it that one last push and just hang on in there and unify and take over that bloody GOP. Don't show them any mercy. That's my advice for America. If you got better advice, I'll listen to it, but that's my advice as an outsider. And sometimes an outsider can see things differently than you can when you're in the battle. So I just want to say, I was as amazed by the Tea Party as the left were, but in a positive way, because I never would have thought there'd be millions of Americans studying their Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, educating themselves, rediscovering American independence. I regard your movement as miraculous. I sincerely do. So just hang on in there, folks. Keep doing it. There's 3 more years. They're going to be tough, but the rewards can be amazing. You can do what George Washington did back then. So I just work your butts off, folks. You're doing the right stuff.
3 more years to grow.
Yeah, you are, you know, and it's going to be good for you too, you know.
Thank you.
You know, you've got your own conscience to live by, haven't you? When you know, you got to do. When you know what's right and you don't do it, that's not good for you. And so we all know what's got to be done. And I'm so proud to be amongst you folks, because, you know, you guys are the best of America. Simple as that. So thank you very much.